My narrative in the Relentless Revolution begins in the 16th century and ends in January 2009, a 5-century trajectory that has transformed our planet and now troubles the heavens. I explore the benchmarks of capitalism's ascent, looking at how the system transformed the material world while churning up practices and beliefs and ideals that had long prevailed within the cocoon of custom. I define capitalism as a set of economic practices that generate wealth through competing individual initiatives using private resources to enhance productivity and earn profits through market exchanges. Sounds pretty ordinary, but every element in that definition challenged the beliefs and institutional arrangements of traditional society. So in order for capitalism to go from a few capitalist practices to an ism involved a protracted struggle with the defenders of the status quo. Capitalism's roots are fairly shallow, not going much deeper than the 17th century. And it took a unique convergence of events and trends and a lot of contingencies for a few individual initiatives in agriculture, science, and technology to push one pioneering country, England, into sustained development beyond the limited economic horizons of endemic scarcities. Trade would never have produced capitalism on its own. It fit well into traditional societies. More important, commerce did not affect the absolute cap on growth, the fact that in all countries it took 80% of the people to farm in order to feed the rest of society. 100 families then could produce enough food for 125 families. And those other 25 families were made up of the military, the clergy, the royal officials, as well as merchants, manufacturers, and artisans. Agricultural changes were essential to moving beyond the world of scarcity. Scarcity so limited, so endemic, that every year famine threatened. In the 17th century, the English and the Dutch began experimenting with new farming techniques. And over the next century, they began growing more food with fewer laborers and less investment. 300 years later, only 36% of English adult males worked the land. But the major factor in changing production processes came in the 17th century with breakthroughs in natural philosophy, the ones we associate with Galileo, with Newton, with Boyle. And what they gained was an understanding of accurate laws of motion, of proof of the existence of a vacuum, and demonstrations of the weight of the atmosphere. Yet all this work from the natural philosophers might never have found its way into new techniques for pulling and lifting and rotating material objects had England not been a society where the members of the scientific elite world mingled easily with manufacturers and mechanics. A free and cheap press in England spread new ideas, helping the advancement of science to advance right into the workshops of a Thomas Newcomen and a James Watt, who turned steam into the engine of economic progress. Capitalist practices couldn't thrive in the interstices of a traditional society because its propulsive force drew more and more people into its work and necessitated changing their habits and their attitudes as well. There was a resistance to these disruptive novelties. The aggressive pursuit of profits and constant change were all anathema to the norms fashioned by aristocrats, monarchs, and priests. Furious debates ensued about these intrusive novelties. Attacks on profit-seeking jostled in the public realm with paeans to a new ideal of productivity. And soon you had people advertising the virtues of efficiency and ingenuity and disciplined work. The capitalists finally won this ideological battle. By the end of the 19th century, the magic of steam was overtaken by the wizardry of electricity. Chemistry joined physics as a handmaiden to industry. Science and technology promoted an unending succession of advances, as we so well know. Capitalists' focus on enhancing production through private initiatives impinged on every facet of life and was itself affected by every institution important to its participants: the family, the local community, national laws. Children had to be reared as individuals, and that word individual was used for the first time to refer to persons in the 18th century. My study is really a sustained argument for looking at capitalism in a different way, for grasping its essence by following the historical course that it traced. Capitalism can be isolated from mores, politics, and the law for analytical purposes, but it is never free of them. It exists within a social system, always subject to widely shared attitudes. If I had a goal in writing the Relentless Revolution, it was to make us more aware of ourselves as shapers of capitalism's future. The experiences of market participants influence the direction of capitalist development, as do changing sensibilities, and I want to give you two examples of this. After World War II, leaders wanted to avoid the hostile rivalries that followed after World War I, plunging the world into depression and then into a Second World War. And so they put in place a series of international accords that triggered the 25 years of post-World War II prosperity. Our sensibilities changed too, affecting our values and behavior. Slavery and child labor are now abhorrent to us. They no longer figure in the economies of most countries, not because they don't make economic sense, but because they offend us. Both cases reveal capitalism as a cultural system that changes as we, the participants, change, either inadvertently or through specific campaigns like those against slavery and child labor. At the end of the book, I enumerate capitalist sins. My list includes responding to short-term opportunities to the neglect of long-term consequences, dispensing power without responsibility, promoting material values over spiritual ones, commoditizing human relations, monetizing social values, and corrupting democracy and capriciously unsettling very old social arrangements. These qualities mean that despite the great wealth that capitalism has generated, the world is still plagued by pervasive poverty, destitute communities, failed states, and oppressive governments. There are many innovative reformers who are addressing these problems, but it has been market growth in Korea, Taiwan, China, Malaysia, India that has lifted 300 million out of poverty during the last 30 years, reminding us that capitalism still does the heavy lifting. Clarity about the nature of the capitalist system could enable us to make wiser policy decisions, for the market is not a self-correcting system, as its apologists argue. Assertions about its autonomy make it hard for us to recognize that the market should and can serve us, not just as private persons, but as members of a society with laudable goals like securing living wages and providing universal health care and good schools. At a critical moment in the journey of capitalism to dominance, the importance of cultural influences was dispatched to a conceptual limbo, and we've got to drag them back into the light. I conclude my book, as I will this talk, by observing that while capitalism is a relentless revolution, it is not a mindless one. There is much we can do to shape capitalism's future and retain its amazing wealth-generating capacity, as long as we are not so foolish as to kill the incentives that fuel it.
Thank you, Joyce. Next, Roger Farmer is professor and chair of the economics department here at UCLA. He served as a consultant to the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, the Reserve Bank of Australia, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of England. He's a contributor to the Financial Times Economic Forum. He's written not one but two books. One is written for academics and practicing economists. It's called Expectations, Employment, and Prices. The other, which you'll be talking about this morning, is written for the general reader. It's called How the Economy Works: Confidence, Crashes, and Self-Fulfilling Prophecies. Please welcome Roger Farmer.
Thank you very much for that introduction, John. So we were asked today to talk about the question, does the American economy have a future? And the short answer is yes. I know you'd like to hear that. The American economy is a capitalist economy, and as Joyce has eloquently reminded us, capitalism is an evolving system. We've learned from past crises, and we will learn from this one.